Our relationships change the course of our lives, but can they change history? I'm the affair archivist, and in this two-part series, we will be exploring the affair between Vivien Leigh and Laurence Olivier. Once Hollywood's golden couple, Vivien Leigh and Laurence Olivier were enamored with each other at first sight. Vivien turned to a friend upon seeing Larry and said, "I'm going to marry him." The only issue was, she was married, and so was he. Their love affair would break up two families and would eventually end as a result of the strain of Vivien's mental health issues. Nonetheless, decades after they parted ways, Larry watched one of Vivien's films on television shortly before his death, insisting that their love was the real thing. Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh were born halfway across the world from one another, 6 years apart, at two different ends of the social strata. Through their shared love of acting, they would eventually find each other. Olivier was born on May 22, 1907, in Dorking, Surrey, to a working-class family. His father worked for the church, but struggled to keep a job. He was the youngest of three. His mother doted on him, inciting his father's resentment and jealousy. In 1920, when Larry was only 12 years old, she died of a brain tumor. Many years later, Larry reflected, "There was undoubtedly a paradise in my childhood, and it lasted until my mother died. I've been looking for her ever since, with all of the world's nostalgia for what is gone and cannot be recovered." The gap between him and his father widened after the death of his mother. Olivier began performing at the age of 9, acting in numerous Shakespearean productions throughout his teen years. He planned to follow his brother in managing a rubber plantation in India. However, his father intervened and convinced him to pursue acting. By 1929, he made his West End debut and was on his way to fame and prestige. Olivier married Jill Esmond in 1930. Esmond was an actress whose father was a famous theater producer, which may have appealed to Larry as an up-and-coming actor. Larry asked her to marry him twice. The first time, Jill turned him down because she was in love with another man, but then the second time she agreed to marry him. They were both virgins when they married, and Olivier accidentally shaved off half of his mustache the morning after his wedding night. Larry made his way to Hollywood in 1931 and was signed with RKO. However, his first venture out west was a failure. He was cast alongside superstar Greta Garbo in Queen Christina. However, Garbo demanded the Green Olivier be fired in favor of her on-again, off-again lover, John Gilbert. Larry would be reluctant to return to Hollywood after this experience. Vivien Leigh was born Vivian Hartley on November 5, 1913, in Darjeeling, India. Her father was a successful stockbroker. Vivien made her stage debut at the age of 3. As an infant, she struggled to sleep and had frequent mood swings. Her life changed forever when at the age of 6, she was sent to England to attend school at the Sacred Heart Convent. She was devastated to be separated from her parents and wrestled with feelings of abandonment for years afterward. Vivien's parents felt pressured to send their daughter back to the UK to be educated because although she came from a high social class, she would be discriminated against if she stayed in India. Feeling guilty, her father sent her a porcelain doll to cheer her up. The doll arrived with its head shattered. Though she adapted to her new circumstances, the separation permanently alienated her and her parents. She left Sacred Heart at age 14 and attended finishing schools around Europe. Around this time, her handwriting changed, going from pristine cursive to chicken scrawl. She wrote she was terribly miserable. Only with time and advancements in medicine do we now know that Vivien was dealing with the onset of bipolar disorder, which would upend her life years later. After her formal education ended, she attended the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. While studying acting, she met her first husband, Herbert Lee Holman, who was an attorney. They married exactly a year later. He was 34, she was 21. Aside from the age gap, it does appear that the couple were mismatched from the start. Olivier described Holman as a dull man, dry, cerebral, without sparkle. Larry later changed his mind on Holman and recanted these insults. Less than a year after that, Vivien gave birth to Suzanne, her only child, in 1933. She may have taken her husband's name for her stage name, but it didn't take long for Vivien to lose interest in him, married life, and motherhood. Vivien preferred the company of her fellow actors and was determined to have a career on the stage. By the mid 1930s, she was a star in London. Vivien first saw Olivier when he was performing in the summer of 1934. That's when she turned to her friend, convinced he would be her husband. When her companion reminded her they were both already married, Vivien said, "It doesn't matter. I'll still marry him one day." Larry was in a similar place to Vivien, a rising star of the London stage who was losing interest in his marriage. Before meeting Leigh, Olivier had affairs with actresses Greer Garson and Peggy Ashcroft. Olivier recalled his first meeting with Vivien many years later. "I first set my eyes upon the possessor of this wondrous, unimagined beauty on the stage of the Ambassador Theatre. Apart from her looks, which were magical, she possessed beautiful poise. Her neck looked almost too fragile to support her head and bore it with a sense of surprise." The pair formally met at a group dinner at the Savoy Grill. Larry invited her to one of he and Jill's parties soon after. In January of 1936, though their affair did not yet start, they had lunch alone. Soon, Larry was calling Vivien Vivling, Holman's pet name for his wife. Soon he would be stealing more than just nicknames from Vivien's husband. Conveniently, she and Larry were cast together in a film called Fire Over England. When Vivien heard Olivier was to star in the picture, she was desperate for the role of his love interest. The film was a propaganda piece that warned of the dangers of Hitler's rise to power. Production began in July of 1936. Soon after, Vivien and Larry were spending every free moment together, sequestered in a private corner of the set, to hold hands and kiss. They were making love multiple times a day, Larry told a friend. Vivien recalled, "I don't think I have ever lived quite as intensely ever since. I don't remember sleeping, ever. Only every precious moment we spent together." Holman was often away on boating outings and was completely oblivious to Vivien's affair. Jill, heavily pregnant and on bed rest, was likely aware of what was happening, smelling Vivien's perfume on Larry on the rare occasions he was home. She likely believed the affair would not last. Their son, Simon Tarquin, was born in August of 1936. Larry, though he was absent throughout the pregnancy, was there holding her hand throughout the difficult labor. Their son barely survived his first moments on Earth. Larry brought Vivien to meet his newborn son. Jill didn't protest this and warmly welcomed Vivien into her home, trying to befriend her as a means of getting her to back off of her husband. This tactic did not work. Larry arrived at Tarquin's christening with Vivien, not his wife. They disappeared from the party for a while. Larry returned alone, with lipstick on his cheek. Vivien went on a solo trip to Italy that autumn, her main motivation being that Larry was already in Capri with his wife and child. When they met up at the hotel, Larry called out, "Darling," and they ran into each other's embrace. Jill awkwardly made it a group hug, but she could no longer deny that her marriage was in serious trouble. Both Larry and Vivien felt extreme guilt for their actions, but were also addicted to each other and could not stop. Larry described himself as a really worm-like adulterer, slipping in between another man's sheets. Their love affair entailed 2 years of furtive life, lying life. They were eager to collaborate with each other, not just for artistic gain, but to have an excuse to be together for extended periods of time. Larry set out to stage Hamlet in Denmark, with him in the titular role and Vivien starring as Ophelia. The opening night of the production, however, was almost a disaster. A torrential downpour ruined the outdoor performance as originally planned. However, the cast and crew pivoted and quickly staged the play inside with just a moment's notice. It was a triumph, especially for Olivier, but he barely had any time to bask in the glory when the following day Vivien was acting strangely. According to witnesses, Larry left Vivien and faced the cast of the play looking like a deer in the headlights, telling them that Vivien had lost control and attacked him. When Vivien appeared, she did not speak and was just staring blankly into space, according to a witness. This was a result of Vivien's bipolar disorder, which caused her to swing between states of mania and depression. Often, when Vivien would have a manic episode, she would not remember what happened afterwards. This was the first time she acted this way towards Larry. However, his love for her did not waver. Over time, her illness would get worse, and it would test his devotion. After they returned from Denmark, Vivien and Larry decided it was time to leave their marriages and be together in earnest. Still, Vivien in particular was conflicted. She was raised Catholic and was worried about how divorce would affect her and Larry's careers. She did not want to abandon her daughter the way she was abandoned, and at an even younger age than she was when she was sent to the convent. It also occurred to her that perhaps one day Larry would cheat on her, given that he was already unfaithful to his current wife. Still, she decided to move forward and told her husband she was having an affair and wanted out of the marriage. Holman was blindsided and refused to grant her a divorce. Jill was also unwilling to go without a fight. Her looks were changed by her pregnancy, and her acting career was pretty much done. Larry was all she had. She went to the Holmans' home and begged Vivien not to take Larry from her. Vivien, resting on her fancy couch, coldly asked how Larry liked his eggs. Jill, resigned to defeat, left. In June of 1937, Vivien left her home in the middle of the night as her husband and child slept. Their housekeeper found Holman quietly sitting in the home the next morning. He told her Vivien left. I thought he meant she had gone early to the studio. Later, she asked me to stay and look after him. Mr. Holman was very good about it. He never bore her any grudge. But it was a long time before I came to like Sir Laurence Olivier. We were such a happy house until he came along. Vivien's relationship with Suzanne would always be distant. Vivien's mother, Gertrude, raised her. Larry was similarly estranged from Tarquin. Even though his wife left like a thief in the night, Holman held out hope that she would return to him. Vivien and Larry moved into the home of a mutual friend before getting a place of their own. They were happy to be together, but tortured by guilt. Vivien knew she had surrendered the right to ask for custody rights for Suzanne because she had left the family. She said it was nightmares for us and torture for the others. Holman held out and refused to grant Vivien a divorce. He said he would give her a month, and if she still wanted to divorce then, he would allow it. A month later, she wrote to him informing him that although it was a difficult decision, she still wanted to leave the marriage. She hoped that they could remain friends afterwards. Vivien oscillated between pleading for Holman's forgiveness and begging him for a divorce for years. He still refused, despite the ultimatum he previously laid out. Her only other option was to wait 3 years and to somehow convince him to end the marriage by filing for divorce on the grounds of desertion. Jill was also suffering deeply due to the loss of her husband. Her hair turned white overnight. She developed a rash on her face and varicose veins, and had strange dreams. In one of them, she dreamt she saved Vivien as she was about to be run over by a steamroller. She had tried to befriend the woman she knew was after her husband previously, having intellectual conversations with her about books and begging for her mercy. So perhaps this dream represented her desire to gain Vivien's approval, making it harder for her to take her husband from her. Tarquin wrote of the effect the affair had on his mother. I had never known her comfortable in her own skin, probably the aftermath of Larry. Her nervousness and never-ending cigarettes had changed her. Both she and Holman never remarried, and both lived to the age of 82. Vivien and Larry bought a cottage in Chelsea together and worked on another film that would be a flop. Each morning, Larry arrived to set looking exhausted and disheveled, claiming that Vivien demanded they stay up all night and have sex. Still, his career was on the rise as his triumphs on the stage mounted and more film offers rolled in. Vivien, however, was still seen as just a pretty face who had not yet proven she had talent, according to many critics of the time. Despite his previous failure in Hollywood, Larry was approached to play Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights, an opportunity that could change his entire life and career. He was hesitant for a few reasons. He did not believe his talent translated to the screen, and he was weary of Hollywood after his bad experience there earlier in the decade. He held out on accepting the role, in particular, to ensure that Vivien was cast as Kathy. However, Merle Oberon won the role. Vivien was offered a smaller part. However, she haughtily said, "I will play Kathy or nothing." Though he tried to stand firm on this issue, when he heard other actors were being considered, Larry accepted the role. He departed for the United States in the autumn of 1938, leaving Vivien behind in London. He wrote to her, "I keep weeping a little this morning. I do worship you, my love. Please stop wanting to cry, my beloved. It makes me want to, too." On the voyage there, he drank heavily to drown his sorrows. Larry wrote often and sent Vivien drawings, which she kept on her nightstand, bound together with a red ribbon. She was worried he would not be faithful to her while they were separated for an extended period of time. He tried to arrange for time off to meet her in New York. However, the producer of the film, William Wyler, would not allow him to go. Larry misplaced his anger and tortured Oberon. When she asked him to stop spitting in her face while they were acting, he yelled, "What's a little spit between actors?" He insulted her for the pockmarks she had on her face, which were remnants of a bout of smallpox she suffered as a child. Oberon walked off the set. While Larry was languishing on the set of what would be his big break, Vivien received an even bigger opportunity. She got an audition to play Scarlett O'Hara in David O. Selznick's adaptation of Margaret Mitchell's best-selling novel, Gone with the Wind. She arrived in Los Angeles in December of 1938, and they stayed together in a room at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Though they were both still married, they felt safe getting a room together, as nobody knew who they were in America. The role of Scarlett O'Hara was the most coveted female lead in Hollywood history up to that point. Selznick launched a nationwide search and considered stars like Bette Davis, Paulette Goddard, and Jean Arthur. She may have been a little-known English stage actress, but with her beauty, charm, and talent, Vivien won the role. This was contingent on her signing a 7-year contract with Selznick, which stipulated she would have to make one film a year for him. Though Vivien was hesitant to agree to this, she knew turning this down would mean walking away from the role of a lifetime, so she signed. When the news broke that an English actress was cast to play literature's most iconic Southern belle, many Americans were outraged, believing a true Southern girl should have been given the part. They were not the only ones upset about Vivien's casting. David O. Selznick received a visit from none other than Laurence Olivier, who begged him not to cast his lover. He feared that an Englishwoman was incapable of pulling off a Southern belle, that Vivien would be ridiculed, her career ruined. Later, Larry claimed he merely asked Selznick to give Vivien a raise. Was this true, or was he jealous that she had scored a momentous role pretty much out of thin air, and worried that she would overshadow him before his Hollywood career even began? Whatever the case may be, winning the role of Scarlett O'Hara was not a cakewalk for Vivien. The production was chaotic and troubled from the start. She and her co-star, Clark Gable, disliked each other immediately, with Vivien believing him to be coarse and crass, Gable believing her to be prissy and precious. She loved the film's original director, George Cukor, but after he was fired, had issues with his replacement, Victor Flemming. She believed him to be an inferior director. He told her she could shove the script up her royal British ass. He also demanded more close-ups of her bosom. Vivien would leave the long work days totally exhausted, yet unable to sleep once she went to bed. Every nerve in my body was pounding. I had to take tonics to keep going. At the end, I was quite raving mad, ready for the lunatic asylum. Larry wrapped Wuthering Heights and departed for New York to work on the stage. Vivien begged him to stay in California, but he refused. To make their separation more bearable, Larry asked Vivien to send him a pair of her panties. He wrote back, "I am sitting naked with just my parts wrapped in your panties." As the long and grueling production wore on, Vivien's mental health continued to deteriorate. So much so that Selznick begged Larry to come to LA to visit her in March of 1939. Though Selznick was desperate to keep their affair under wraps to avoid the scandal tarnishing the film's prospects, he knew Vivien was in a bad way and knew only Larry could lift her spirits. Larry came over to spend the day with Vivien, which improved her mental health. After returning from a weekend away in Kansas City with Larry, Vivien told Selznick, "Oh, David, I'm so grateful to you. Larry met me in the hotel lobby, and we went upstairs, and we fucked the whole weekend. In April of 1939, Wuthering Heights was released and was an automatic success. Larry could not go out in public without women chasing him and ripping his clothes off. Still in New York City, Larry wrote to Vivien, assuming that Gone with the Wind would be a disastrous flop. You have got to justify yourself in the next 2 or 3 films, or even 2 or 3 years, by proving that the presumable failure of Gone with the Wind was not your fault, and you can only do that by being really good in the following parts. Vivien was also convinced the film would set her career back significantly, which you can't really blame her for given what a nightmare the production was. After briefly returning to England in the summer of 1939, Larry and Vivien returned to the United States in August for the production of Rebecca, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, produced by Selznick. Vivien was embittered when Selznick informed her she was not the right fit for the role of the mousy, unnamed narrator. She did complete a screen test in which one critic said she was Scarlet in a cardigan. During the shoot, World War II began in Europe, and Larry was desperate to get home and enlist. However, he and Vivien were told by government officials that their place was in America to help the British war effort abroad and to make pro-English propaganda. Larry begrudgingly stayed, but regretted the decision. They both received heavy criticism from the British public for staying abroad during these dark times. In December, Gone with the Wind premiered in Atlanta. Selznick did not want Larry to attend, again worried that his presence would tip the press off to the true nature of their relationship, but Vivien got her way on this one. The film was, of course, a massive success, the likes of which Hollywood had never seen. The press coverage of the premiere was extensive. Selznick saw clippings which made my heart fail when the Daily News ran a photo of Larry and Vivien together, complaining to one of his employees that they need watching every minute. One journalist wrote that their affair was a love story so sizzling that, for one of the few times in its history, it found Hollywood going full steam ahead into reverse in frantic efforts to suppress the facts. Surprisingly, the revelation of the affair did not destroy Vivien's reputation in the United States or England. Women were gaining more independence, and divorce was becoming less taboo. The public perceived Vivien as a more independent woman based on her romance with Olivier. A journalist for Photoplay magazine wrote in 1939, "There is a passion and vitality that touches both of them, that makes them care terribly about all things. But they care more for each other. They care more for each other than they do for money or careers or friends or harsh words or even life itself. As for what will happen to them after they are wed, well, we are talking of romance, and matrimony is quite a different story." At the 1940 Oscars ceremony, Vivien and Larry were both nominated in the lead actress and actor categories. They did not attend together, however. Larry escorted Olivia de Havilland, and Vivien went with Selznick. Although most knew of their affair by this point, flaunting it at the Academy Awards on Vivien's big night would not have been seen as in good taste, especially by Selznick, we can assume. Vivien won the Oscar for her iconic portrayal of Scarlett O'Hara. In her acceptance speech, she said there were simply too many other people for her to name, thanking only Selznick. The green-eyed monster consumed Larry. He later admitted, "It was all I could do to restrain myself from hitting her with it. I was insane with jealousy." He lost the Oscar to Robert Donat, who was nominated and won for Goodbye, Mr. Chips. When taking photos with Olivier, Vivien placed her Oscar outside of the shot, something she did not do when she was photographed with Selznick and her co-stars. Fresh off the success of 2 huge films, Vivien and Larry chose a traveling stage production of Romeo and Juliet as their next venture. It did not go well. Critics tore into Larry's portrayal of Romeo, pointing out his bravado and overly masculine performance did not match the youthful character he was portraying. While climbing up to Juliet's balcony during one performance, Larry lost his balance and was dangling from the railing. The audience laughed at his predicament. When the production came to New York, the theater was so hot the play so ill-received that audience members demanded refunds outside the theater. Larry personally handed them their money back. All in all, the couple lost $96,000 on Romeo and Juliet. After a long and drawn-out affair, Vivien and Larry finally obtained divorces and married on August 31st, 1940, in Santa Barbara. Katharine Hepburn was one of the few people in attendance. On their wedding rings, each spouse left a message to the other. Vivien's to Larry's was, "Faithfulness is my guide," in French. Larry to Vivien, "The last one you'll get, I hope." The marriage didn't change Vivien and Larry's unpopularity in their homeland. Some critics even went as far as to say the couple should be banned from returning to England, and that they supported isolationism. This was untrue. Vivien in particular did not enjoy life in the United States and desperately wanted to return to England. To rehabilitate their reputations in their homeland, producer Alex Korda cast Vivien and Larry in That Hamilton Woman, in which Vivien portrayed Emma Hamilton, mistress of Horatio Nelson, a British naval hero. The story was meant to draw parallels between England's struggle against Napoleon and its current fight against Hitler. Some of the censors took issue with the fact that the film depicted an adulterous couple. A scene in which Nelson's father admonishes him for breaking his marriage vow was added. When That Hamilton Woman was released, it was a huge hit in the United States and England, and helped to restore Vivien and Larry's reputations. Winston Churchill often screened the film for guests, and sent Vivien a painting, Study of Roses, as a thank you for making the film. Vivien always kept the Prime Minister's painting hanging in her bedroom. In December of 1940, Vivien and Larry made the risky journey back to England by sailing from New York to Lisbon, risking a U-boat attack, then getting on a plane from Portugal to England. On the flight, the cockpit caught fire. Thankfully, it was put out and they landed home safely. Larry joined the Fleet Air Arm, as he was not admitted to the regular army due to having hearing issues. And he learned how to fly, though he was not very good at it. Larry did not see combat during the war. Vivien suffered a miscarriage during this time period and traveled to Africa to perform for the troops shortly after. She wrote to Larry, "I am so miserable. To think I am having all these excitements and seeing so many places without you. I can never really enjoy any of it, or anything that I don't share with you, my darling love, my only life." Larry continued working periodically throughout the war years, both in film and on stage. Olivier had an epiphany when director Tyrone Guthrie found him backstage sulking after his latest play bombed. The director asked him if he loved the character. Larry said no. Guthrie replied, "If you can't love him, you'll never be any good as him, will you?" This changed his entire approach to his craft. Olivier realized he must fully embody the character through deep study and reflection in order to achieve the level of greatness he aspired to. This brought him to new heights as an actor, but also diverted his attention away from Vivien when she needed it most. Actor-director Peter Glenville said he wanted to appear with Vivien Leigh because he was very much in love with her, but his love was second to his obsession with acting. Thank you very much for watching. I'm the Affair Archivist. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. And join me for part 2 of this series, The Real Thing, Vivien Leigh and Laurence Olivier.